Hey, Dr. Mike here. Are you trying to avoid packaged foods but keep finding them in your cart? Maybe they're not that bad. Stay tuned to learn more with our guest and friend of Live Foreverish, registered dietitian, Holli Ryan.
You're listening to Live Foreverish, a show dedicated to helping you live just a little longer. Here's your hosts, Dr. Mike and Dr. Crystal Gossard.
All right, welcome to Live Foreverish. We have a guest, Holli Ryan. She is a registered dietitian, food and nutrition expert, registered and licensed dietitian nutritionist. Very interesting. She's a writer, blogger, and social media specialist. Has been on the show before. Holli, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So Dr. Crystal is just jumpy excited today. And she is because she loved an article you wrote, right? What is it? Additives in processed foods, 10 ingredients to avoid. Right? That's what you loved, right?
I loved it. I love the content. I love when my colleagues can give me a different perspective and put me in my place. She set me straight, Dr. Mike, in the article.
Well, I try to set you straight all the time, and you just laugh at me.
No. Holli, she made some amazing points and a good perspective, and we'll talk about some of those perspectives. But it was eye-opening, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Why did you want to write this?
So we hear all the time, avoid this ingredient, watch out for this ingredient. That ingredient is banned in other countries and allowed in the U.S. So I really wanted to explore, okay, what are these ingredients? What does the research say? Are they really that bad? And just ultimately, it's really not practical to avoid anything in a package, right? In today's modern world, we just can't do that. So, and the fact that ingredients can vary significantly by brand, ultimately, it comes down to doing a lot of label reading, not only looking at the nutrition facts section, but also the ingredient list.
Yes.
That's where you also want to pay attention to these. That's where you'll find those additives, right? So to make this, it's kind of like a daunting task. You don't want to spend so much time in the aisle reading. So to make this task easier, I made a list, of ingredients to look out for.
So I could take that list, go to the store, right? And
yeah.
These are the things I want to avoid. We're going to get into a lot because I know Dr. Crystal is ready. I only have one big question, right? And because this is your world, you guys' world, right? There's everything at some point could have some processing, right? I think the word process has been beat up a little bit, right? It's like it's been villainized, yet processing is kind of normal in our food chain. So isn't it about the level or something, or a category of how much processing is being done?
Yeah, absolutely. Most foods have gone through some level of processing, whether it's a very basic level or what we call ultra processed. And we'll get into that. But, there's unprocessed or natural foods. You pick a blueberry off a blueberry bush. That's natural, But if it's been dried and sugar added, okay, now we're getting into some processing, right? So, so you have minimally processed, cleaning, removal of unwanted parts, fractioning, pasteurization. But when we're talking minimally processed, we're not really talking about oils, fats, sugar, salt. That stuff is not considered in minimally processed. But when you get into processed, that's where these other culinary components are kind of added in. To make the food more palatable, to preserve it. And then we get into the ultra processed foods, UPFs, right? So ultimately this is, a lot of it's junk food, right? We all know junk food, but there's some things in there that are considered ultra processed that, okay, may surprise you. Cereal, right? We were talking a little bit about this earlier. But even a sugary yogurt is considered ultra processed.
Oh, well.
So that, wash out for the sugar content.
You would agree with that because that's one of the your big
absolutely
things.
Yes, we talked about that on our school lunch LE Live about the sugary yogurts. And I think it's important to understand the different levels, and we can't just say avoid processed foods completely. I think it's an impossible statement to make. And what stood out to me from your article was often, and we've said this, Dr. Mike, shop the perimeter of the grocery store.
Yeah.
And you can't make that blanket statement because the perimeter of the store is filled with ultra processed foods as well.
Yeah. And it assumes the aisles, the inner ones, don't have any healthy food,
right?
Which they could have, right? I mean,
yeah. So the thought behind that is you'll find your produce on the perimeter, you'll find your fresh kind of like dairy products and things like that, but there's gonna be additives in some of that packaged stuff on the perimeter. And on the same accord, like you were just saying, in the middle, there is going to be some nutritious items like nuts and some canned foods without.
I still like it, though. I still think it's a good general statement. Like, come on, just in general.
Well, I think potentially, right, because the perimeters will.
She doesn't like my answer anymore.
I think generally speaking, and it's a great concept because there would be less preservatives because they have to be kept cold.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think conceptually there would be less maybe salt or less sugar, but it doesn't mean that it's not processed or ultra processed. And I think it just goes back to what you stated earlier, just looking at those labels. And I think that's kind of a good place to start.
Okay.
Let's look at what are some of those additives that you found in research that could be problematic. Maybe we can just go through a list and talk about each one.
Yeah. So I'm going to highlight, some of the main ones, some of the kind of like main red flag ones.
Mm-hmm.
But just also, let's just define an additive. So an additive, right? A substance added to a food to improve or preserve it, right? So on the most basic level, salt and sugar, and we'll get into that later. But I first want to talk about some of the more like true kind of things we may think of when we say an additive.
Okay.
Wait, let me ask a quick question though, because I think you said this already. I just want to make sure. I'm trying to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Salt and sugar, though, you said aren't. Yes, that's additives, but those are not kind of considered like processing because that's so common. Is that what you said?
No,
or is
they are. Yeah, they are considered additives in processed food. But I'm going to come back to those later. First, I want to talk about like some other things. So, and I also want to say this before I get into the list. When it comes to additives, so a common theme that I found when researching this topic is that most things are not harmful in small amounts. Okay, so that's why it's important to limit processed foods and have a varied diet, because when you're eating too much of something, no good, right?
The amounts go up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So number one I'm going to talk about is artificial sweeteners. And we did
we don't like those.
a live show about sugar alternatives, right, Dr. Mike? So
that's right.
And we talked about this a little bit, but it's worth mentioning here because point blank, they've been associated with increased cancer risk.
Yeah.
Right? So that's concerning. To name a few, you have aspartame, which brand name, it'll be NutraSweet or Equal. Which that one actually was also associated with an increased infertility risk. So you have some concerning associations with these. Saccharin, brand name Sweet and Low, sucralose, Splenda. Okay.
And may I just jump in? It is when you're looking at your labels too, it's going to be on those labels that say sugar free. So people think that they're buying something healthy.
Yeah.
Right.
If they see sugar free.
Yeah, but it's still sweet, so you got to go, how is this sweet if it's sugar-free?
Exactly. If you ever see on the front of the label, sugar-free, or maybe they'll say like 0 gram sugar, you instantly have to think to yourself, okay, what are they putting in there to compensate for that? It is going to be something.
Yeah.
It's never not going to be anything. There's going to be something else to replace that sugar. It's either going to be one of the more natural alternatives, something like stevia, which we like, and then or one of the ones we don't like, the artificial ones.
Yeah, for sure. And the artificial ones, for the most part, are used because they're so cheap. And they're sweet, and we like that.
Super sweet to the taste buds, so you don't have to use as much.
Yeah. I remember years and years ago when saccharin was pretty much the only one available. It was the pink packaging, right? And then a study did come out showing it caused cancer in rats, like in lab studies, and so they had to add that to their packaging. And they fought it. Like, they fought against the research. They fought against having to do that, but they had to. And I still think today it's on the packaging.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, I do remember that.
The pink packet.
Wow.
So what else is on your list?
Next one, nitrates. So,
Oh.
so these are preservatives in processed meats. So you may remember this, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the World Health Organization came out with a statement. They said, hey, processed meats, hot dogs, increase our risk of cancer, colorectal cancer.
With every one hot dog you ate, there was, I remember that.
Yeah.
Just like, oh no.
And you think about how bad that is as you eat another hot dog.
So, save it for 4th of July. Maybe it's something you don't want to be eating weekly, right?
Yeah.
So.
But and again, though, a food like that to some families and stuff, they're cheap. It's easy protein. Because we talked about the food insecurity thing as well.
We do.
So we don't want to, make it sound like they're doing something bad. But as you said before, variety. Figure out a way to get other protein and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hunger is a big problem. Food we want to eat, right? We want to make sure we're fed, but try to use some discretion if possible. So
what about? So you said nitrates, right?
Yeah.
All right, so now a lot of brands they say nitrate free and that kind of stuff. How true is that? Right? Is that, I mean, and if they're not using nitrates to preserve, what are they using then?
It's a good question. Possibly more sodium.
Yeah.
But in terms of, is that true? There's going to be some naturally occurring.
There are some. Remember, we did cover that.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing you'll find, Dr. Mike, is the nitrate free, they just don't last as long.
Right.
Remember the days you would buy the cold cuts and they would last for months. It seemed like
my dad would stack up on bologna. No, seriously, because he loved it, number one. And if it was ever like a buy one, get one free, he would just, and it would sit in there for, I don't know, I mean, months and months, and it was fine.
It was fine. And now, when you buy the healthier versions, I give it 3 or 4 days.
And it's done.
It's slimy. You just have to throw it out. So I think that's what's happening is they just don't have the shelf life.
Yeah.
And maybe antioxidants, maybe like some rosemary extract, something like that to
help.
Yeah.
So, but why do we need to, what's the big deal about nitrates?
So just the association with increased cancer risk. Basically what happens is the nitrates, the proximity to the amino acids from protein in these foods, plus a lot of times being cooked at high temperature, if we're talking like, on the grill, like hot dogs versus just deli meat, it could create these cancer-causing nitrosamines and also advanced glycated end products, which
aging stuff
can contribute to accelerated aging.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. And
All
that's when you take that hot dog and put it on the grill, Dr. Mike.
Yes, and that's the best way to do it. Have two. Hey, so just to make sure as we go through this list, right? Are these in order of like the worst to the, or is it just a general list of ones?
Yeah, not necessarily in order, but I'm highlighting kind of the top ones I think that people should pay attention to.
Okay.
All right, so we've got 2 so far. What's next?
So just also other preservatives, artificial preservatives, BHA, BHT, TBHQ. These ones have been linked to potentially like endocrine disruption and sleep disturbances. It's not more studies are needed to really say, hey, you should definitely stay away from these, but I would keep an eye on it, you know.
And what were those again?
BHT.
Okay.
BHA. I guess they're similar in their composition. And then another one is TBHQ.
Okay.
And these, and so they basically fall under hormone like disruptors, that type of stuff. And I think there is a disclaimer in all this. More research is always there's nothing wrong with needing more research.
Yeah.
A lot of people hearing that and they're like, oh, see, that's none of that. That's not true. We always want more data and stuff. However, tell me if I'm wrong. I think in the processing food industry, they don't want more studies. They don't want more data on this stuff. So they do fight against a lot of additional studies and stuff.
That's true.
All right, what we got next?
All right, so high fructose corn syrup is my next one. Now, it's a sweetener. It's made from corn. It is used widely in ultra processed foods. It's cheap, and it's basically another type of sugar to watch out for ultimately. So there's sucrose, there's table sugar, half glucose, half fructose. When it comes to high fructose corn syrup, especially when we're talking about things like soda, more fructose ratio in there, higher amount of fructose, 55 versus 50. But, like I said, ultimately, it's added sugar to watch out for.
Yeah, and there's some decent research too showing that high impact of fructose on your system, very bad for your liver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of liver issues. A matter of fact, there's a few of your metabolic experts that think a lot of the non-alcoholic fatty liver and stuff, from the bad diet, a lot of that comes from the excess fructose that people are getting from their diet. Yeah.
Yes.
And now it's not always called that, right? On a label. Don't they hide it? Isn't there other names for it that people don't? I thought I saw that.
I
Didn't
think
you told me that.
There are other. Yeah. Do you know of a specific?
So there's the high fructose corn syrup. Is it the corn
syrup? Right. It'll just say corn syrup.
Yeah. There's a something like that.
Yes.
There's a new name. Corn solids or something like that.
There are other ways to say it, and really that's what it is.
They're being tricky.
Uh-huh.
They're being tricky. But I think that's a big one to avoid, personally.
But I would have to say this. Just because it says no high fructose corn syrup on that front panel, that's marketing.
Yeah.
Still turn
the label over.
They're not it's sweetened somehow.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you still have to look at the amount of sugar.
Yeah.
Regardless
and the
of
only
the source.
the only reason they use it's cheap. You can buy buckets of that stuff, and that's why it's cheaper than refined, like a basic sugar or whatever.
Yeah, I think it also goes back to like corn being like a subsidized crop, right? So
that's listen. I do think that's a big one. I think that the impact on the liver is pretty big. Okay, what we got next?
So like I was kind of mentioning earlier, added sugar and excessive sodium. Listen, we need sodium, right? It's an electrolyte, it's a mineral. We need it, but we get too much.
Mm-hmm,
and
for sure.
It's lurking, it's hiding in these processed foods, bag of chips, frozen meals. It's in there. And so on average, Americans consume 3,400 milligrams of sodium a day,
which is way higher than what's in it.
50% more than what we should, the 2,300 milligram limit.
And if you're high blood, have hypertension, it should be like 1,500, even lower.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of people who do have like hypertension and stuff, and they're told to avoid salt, they think it's the salt shaker, right? They think, and when they go to their doctor, and maybe they're having a hard time controlling the blood pressure, and they're like, "Doctor, I swear I'm not using it," and I believe them. I'm using Mr. Dash now, or is it Mrs. Dash, Mr. Dash? What is it? Whatever that brand is. And I believe them, but what they don't realize is it's hidden in all kinds of other foods they're eating.
Yes, any condiments, bread.
Yep,
is one.
Yeah,
tons of sodium in bread.
Yeah, so
and baked goods.
And we can say this
in plain sight, right? We gotta.
And we say the same thing about sugar.
Yeah. So, the American Heart Association recommends limiting added sugars to 9 teaspoons per day for men, 6 teaspoons for women, and packaged foods. It's a big source of sugar. Yeah.
So when people hear this, though, do you think some people may get confused here, right? Because we just said, okay, watch your sugar, but yet you got to sweeten it with something, and we just said avoid these chemical sweeteners. Like what's worse? Like how do I make that balance? And I think this is where some of those other sweeteners that we've talked about kind of come in, maybe.
Definitely. So like your stevia, your monk fruit, these other things, that's where those come in. And hey, I'm not saying cut out all sugar, but just keeping in mind that these processed and packaged foods are a source of sugar. Just watch out for the artificial ones. Try to find one with a better alternative, or if it does have sugar, just look how many milligrams it has and kind of keep an eye on it throughout the day. Oh, well, I ate this earlier. That had a decent amount of sugar. Maybe I'll opt for some unsweetened yogurt now, and I'll add a banana to it to get some natural sweetness, something like that.
We always like to say, look at the fiber to sugar to fiber ratio as well, and make sure that's 5 or below.
Right.
So you divide the sugars into the total carbs, and that number should be 5 or below. And that's a good, just as each label, a good spot check.
How many processed, let's say ultra processed foods, the box, the cans, the condiments, follow that? Like how many do you think are 5 or below?
Oh, let me tell you, I found a brand of cereal because we like cereal in our homes. And I found a brand and I just put all the boxes, in my cart and just line them up. And I found it, maybe 2 out of the 8 that I had lined up from a brand that was, considered like a better for you cereal brand.
That would have made a good reel or something. You should go do that again. Yeah, that's right. So where are we at on how many we've gone through now?
So we did artificial sweeteners, sugar, preservatives.
You got salt.
I think we're at number 4. We just finished 4.
Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4.
4, yes.
Technically 5,
okay.
yeah. Okay. And then, so another one I wanted to talk about has to do with fats.
Mm-hmm.
So vegetable oils, and now kind of the buzz term is seed oils. And last time I was on the podcast, we went into depth about seed oils. But when it comes to this, it's in your crackers, it's in your tortillas, these packaged things. Basically, it's a lot of omega-6. We're not getting enough omega-3 in the diet.
Mm-hmm.
If we eat too much of these vegetable oils with the high omega-6 content, we're going to be out of balance. Our omega-3 to 6 ratio is going to be out of balance.
Right. Which is going to increase your risk of inflammatory issues, stuff like that. So we and I think when you were on last time, we talked about this. Didn't we cover what the ideal, 3 to 6 ratio is? It's like
about 4 to 1.
4 to 1. 3
ideally
to 1.
less than that.
Yeah.
But 4 to 1 is the reasonable 6 to 3 ratio that's reasonable to achieve. That's your goal. Yeah. Like if you do an omega index test.
Yeah, but most people are 16 to 1, or it's just huge. Mm-hmm. And those omega-6s, again, they're coming from a lot of your animal protein, processed food, seed, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So more fish would help. Mm-hmm. Fish oil nutrients. Right. Add those to your regimen.
And now look for those the air fried options where they're not.
I love my air fryer.
Much of the oils.
I know those are super popular. I don't have one, but it's interesting to me.
I love it. I made chicken wings in the air fryer.
Yeah, they're not the same. But they're
pretty good, you don't have to bread them. I just added my seasoning, threw them in there. No, Nate and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. But that's a way, even with the package.
Yeah.
One of our favorite brands of chips now, they have the air fried option.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got a lot of cereal and chips at your house.
And I like
kids.
That's right.
The avocado oil chips now.
Oh, yes.
Ooh.
Just choosing one made with a better oil too.
Yeah. So avocado oil, coconut oil. Do you like that?
Coconut
oil. A little
oil,
more saturated, I guess.
A little bit more on the saturated. I love avocado oil, and of course, olive oil.
Olive oil is always a good way to go. Okay. So what's next?
So just along the same lines of fats and oils, I wanted to talk a little bit about trans fats.
Okay. What most people now know are no-nos.
Right. Big topic.
But you're going to teach us something.
Okay. So are they still in our food, right? We heard something about legislation declaring, okay, no more partially hydrogenated oils, which are a source of artificial trans fat, the worst type of fat. The FDA declared, okay, they're no longer safe, put regulations into place, banning these trans fats, but it's taking a long time for this to go through. Yeah. Probably a lot of red tape and maybe pushback from the industry.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, again, it all comes down to how can I make this product fast and cheap?
Right.
And some of those, so all these things we've been talking about, they're cheap, right?
Well, we know that the FDA gave the food industry kind of like a grace period to
make that
get
transition.
It out of the foods to transition. And this has been going on for a long time, since like 2015.
Right.
And I think they gave them until 2018, and then they extended it out to like 2020. Yeah. And I think we're finally at a place now where you shouldn't see it. It should not be in your foods.
In packaged foods and stuff. Correct. Because you still have restaurants that use these things. fast food places.
That's a
I mean, I
good
know there's
point,
some
yeah.
cities, I think it was at New York, that banned them in fast food, but not most cities didn't do that. So they're still there. You still got to be, but at least by removing them from those packaged foods, and if you go out to a fast food restaurant once in a while, probably okay. But
Right.
we were getting it all the time.
Yes.
So decreasing in food production is good at the end of the day.
Yeah, so that's a really good point about, the restaurants and stuff. But at least we're getting there with the food. So like you were saying, they give a grace period. Then 2021 January was supposed to be kind of the final compliance date. And here's where I'm a little bit confused, because just earlier this month, August 8th of 2023, they issued a final direct ruling. So I don't know why it started in 2015, but finally in 2023, there's a direct final ruling on it. But okay, here we are. We're
Well,
finally...
does that mean the transition period just now starts?
No, the transition period. I think that the final ruling was updating documentation. Like, remember we had the show and we talked about the guidelines that define specific foods, what they were.
Yeah.
There were still hydrogenated oils and trans fats and some of the definitions of that particular food.
I do. Yeah. Okay.
So they're cleaning up all the documents.
It's
and
the
just
documents,
making sure
it's the
removed
labels,
from everything.
it's not just the putting the food together.
Right,
There's a
right.
lot. There's a lot that
It's
goes
like
into it.
just holistically getting it out of the food
Yeah,
supply as
okay.
much as we possibly can.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful thing. What's next on your list?
So those were kind of the main ones. If you visit my blog article about this, you'll find some others that I explore. I talk a little bit about artificial colors, just some others, preservatives, but these are the main ones to pay attention to.
So if I'm shopping, let's be real now. Let's bring this
Yes,
down to the
thank
everyday person. I'm in the aisle. Apparently, Dr. Crystal says I can go down the middle aisles now. So I'm going down the middle aisle.
But go down slowly, reading as you go.
Well, that's my point. So if I pick out a can of soup, let's say, and I know your list, or I have your list, I look at, and I don't see any of that stuff in there. It looks pretty good. Even though that's a processed can of soup, that's a better choice. Because maybe that's what I can afford. It's what my kids like, whatever that is, right? Is that kind of the take home? It's just knowing this list and doing your best to avoid that wherever you shop, whatever aisle, wherever you're at.
Yeah, do your best. Follow the 80-20 rule in terms of 80% of the time, eating as clean as you can, 20%, okay, maybe I'm going to enjoy this packaged product that I like. And I do have some tips that we can go through.
Okay, sure. Go through the tips.
So when it comes to like your deli meat, choose off the frame sliced meats instead of the ones that have been like cured. That's where you'll find those nitrates.
Okay.
So, they won't last as long. Try to kind of eat them quicker,
Good tip.
sooner.
Like that.
We talked about label reading, keeping an eye on sugars, sodium. Here's like a good rule of thumb. Packaged goods, look for 3 to 5 ingredients.
I like that.
If the list is super long, question it.
Yeah. And the truth about the super long label, most people see that and they're like, oh, whatever. And they just put it in their cart. Yeah. So if you look at a label and you're like, I'm not reading all that, put it back. How about that?
Point.
Yeah.
Yes,
if it's
I like
too
that.
long for you to take the time to read it, put it back.
my husband asked me, why do I take so long to grocery shop? I'm standing there reading all this stuff sometimes. So.
Yeah. I think I like that though. I like that rule. Okay. What's your another tip for us?
So, okay, make a lifestyle change. We like the Mediterranean diet a lot. The flexitarian style of eating is another good one where you consume kind of meat and animal products in moderation. So when you follow these type of healthy eating patterns, you'll naturally navigate away from a lot of these processed things because you'll have more of an emphasis on fruits and vegetables and whole grains that are really emphasized in these type of eating patterns. So, follow these healthy diets.
Yeah, very good. I like you were trying to, what was the thing about going vegetarian? Was it once a week or didn't you say?
Oh, yes.
Like this is a big thing you're trying to do?
Meatless Mondays.
Right.
That's a great, and it doesn't mean like you fill it in with some weird meat substitute.
Yeah.
I mean, you truly
Truly go veggie.
truly
really do
go
it.
veggie.
Yeah.
That plate all veggies.
Like
I think it's a
some-
great way to
yeah,
just kind
grilled
of
vegetables,
slowly get it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, let's emphasize what we should be eating too. More of like, we talk about what we shouldn't eat. If we focus on more of what we should be eating, we know we should be eating more fruits, more vegetables. If we focus on including more of these foods in our diet, we'll naturally exclude some of these other things, right?
Excellent point.
Excellent. And I think that's a good place to remind the audience that they're listening to Holli Ryan. She is a registered dietitian, a writer, blogger, social media expert. If you want to check out her article, you can go to lifeextension.com/processed. And there's a whole bunch more there, I know. So check that out, lifeextension.com/process. Holli, thank you for coming on. Hey, don't forget, you can go to liveforeverish.com. Now I can say for sure there's over 400 episodes.
Wow.
Official.
Yeah, so you can download, like, share, comment. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a show. Oh, by the way, our sponsor, Life Extension, because they really appreciate our audience, is giving you guys a 10% discount off your entire order at lifeextension.com. When you check out, there's a discount code little thing. Put podcast. That's all you got to do. Podcast, 10% off right there. Right? That's pretty cool. All right. But check out more podcasts at liveforeverish.com. I'm Dr. Mike. Thanks for listening.